Welcome to your 2023 Ironman Coeur course preview alongside Kona coach Wendy Mader. I'm Dave Erickson. Your swim begins in the beautiful Lake Coeur this year, as it always has been. It's a two-loop course to get your 2.4 miles of swimming. Now, normally the mornings, the lake is flat with an average water temperature in the high 60s, low 70s, and that's been my experience over the last couple of Ironmans. We've both done this course here. And as before, and as the tendency has been in the last so many years, you will group yourself together with similarly timed swimmers, Wendy, on the shore, and then work your way into. And they do it off, I guess, 3 or 4 athletes at a time every 4 or 5 seconds. So how do you approach a lake swim versus maybe an ocean swim?
I did Ironman Coeur d'Alene in 2008, and the water temperature for me was 57 degrees. And so I highly recommend athletes prepare definitely for a cold water wetsuit swim. I wore a skull cap, which is a neoprene cap that kind of goes around your chin, and then you put your race day cap over it. And I was really glad I had that because that just helped keep my extremities warmer, at least my head. And I was able to get in the water the day before to kind of help myself acclimate to the water temperatures. It's probably the most beautiful lake besides Mirror Lake and Lake Placid that I've ever been in. It's so crystal clear. The colder temperatures to me makes it seem more pristine and clean. And it's very straightforward rectangle. I think it's really hard for someone to go off course during this swim. And like you already said, it's 2.4 miles and it's a rolling start and it's flat, meaning you're going to have really probably no chances of there being any like turbulence to swallow water or to impair your sighting because it's a nice pristine flat swim with a rolling start, meaning they just casually, you just kind of get in the water and your swim starts when you cross that start line. So if you're less experienced swimmers and you want to start in the back, you don't stress about it. Your time of your race is going to start when you get in the water, and you will have 17 hours to complete the race at the time you start your race. Because some people in the back of the pack may be starting, 30 to 45, maybe up to an hour after the first swimmers start. So it's nothing to panic about and it's nothing to stress about. We just want to make sure, and that's why they do the rolling start, kind of a little bit of safety sake. I know the year I did it, it was a mass start. And so it's a little bit different back then. And then I had the opportunity to go watch it in 2009. And I watched someone complete the whole loop times 2 on their back. They did backstroke on an Ironman. And I'm sure, because it's such an easy course to follow, they just probably had to stop, either flip their head in the water or kind of go on their belly to, make sure they were on the right track. But it was just really interesting to be on shore watching someone swim backstroke for an Ironman.
As opposed to other races, you do have the opportunity to do a warm up in the water. And it's a good chance because it depends on the time of year and what the winter was like, on how cold it'll be. It'll give you a good chance to acclimate, get your face in the water, do an adequate warm up, and then they'll make a big announcement where everyone comes back on shore. Now, the buoys will be on your left-hand side as you go out. And it looks like, based on the map, you will come back onto shore briefly, possibly to go around some cones and then jump back in the water for your second loop before completing the full 2.4 miles. But the good thing is you get a chance to do a warm-up before you stand back in line on the beach with all your 3,000 fellow competitors. And so keeping warm, what are some tips on how to keep yourself, I guess, ready to go while you're waiting for your next wave or group of athletes to get in the water, Wendy?
Well, I want to just kind of touch on what you said about the water temperature of the lake will vary depending on the snowfall and the snow melt. So the year I did it, it was really warm air temperatures, but because of the warm air temperatures and the high snowfall that they had, that melted the snow. And so therefore that snow melt brought in much cooler lake water than anticipated, even though the air temperature was fairly warm. And so, again, depending on the air temperature, I've been known to get my transition set up and put my wetsuit on right away and kind of wait around in my wetsuit to keep warm if the air temperature is going to be on the cooler side, because I don't want to be cold or, shivering before I get in cold water. And so that wetsuit definitely is going to become your friend. Again, being mindful of the weather and the water temperature, making sure you do have a skull cap, or I don't know if they allow you to wear booties or hands or gloves. If there is a certain temperature that you're allowed to wear those, and that would be posted on the Ironman site. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I think if it's below 60, you can wear those added neoprene to keep you warm.
One other thing I remember doing the half and the full a number of times, I think you know that the full 3 times and the half 3 or 4 times, is that when you go out, the sun will be rising to your left. You might want to get darker sunglasses, darker goggles, but just be aware the sun will be rising to your left. You may not, you most likely will be still facing the sun by the time you get done, but that's where it'll be coming out. Just be aware of when you go out there, that's the direction of the sun. Still so beautiful, spectator friendly. The crowds are amazing along
Hmm.
the beach wall. Thousands of fans. I mean, it's a really great swim location, and like Wendy said, one of the most beautiful swims at the Ironman courses in North America for sure.
Right. And included within the training plan are links to videos and articles where I talk about how to acclimate to cold water, how to warm up for a cold water swim. And so all that content was within the plan.
The 2023 Ironman Coeur d'Alene bike course is a 2-loop course that starts with a rather flat out and back section along Lake Coeur d'Alene Drive, where you find an easy rhythm to get ready for your 112-mile bike ride. As you pedal out of town, the course will lead you through some rolling hills of North Idaho. There are some quite steep climbs initially, so recognizing that you have nearly 7,000 feet of elevation and you do it twice, so 3,500 or so each loop. Having good gear management and preparing yourself through the course will be very important for your success, settling into your aero position as the flat miles tick away. But there's plenty of ways that you can be successful and fast in this course, but you don't want to go out too hard and try to climb too hard on those hills. Take advantage of those downhills are very, very important. And there's a nice little cheering section at a hot corner. How do you prepare for something with so many feet of elevation, clearly 7,000 feet on this course?
So when I did this race back in 2008, I was not a climber. I was very intimidated by hilly courses. Coeur d'Alene, I was very intimidated by because of the elevation gain. And I got there early enough that this is one course out of probably the only one I've ever driven beforehand because I was really intimidated by the hills. And I remember on the drive going up, going down a hill and then seeing the next hill thinking, oh my God, that is a wall right in front of me.
Yeah.
And in reality, when you get to the hillier section, those downhills give you momentum to go up the next uphill. So there was nothing long or too steep that you will be not have the correct gearing on your bike for. It's different, a little bit different than the climbs I've done in Lake Placid as well as Boulder and other hilly courses. I've even done Ironman Canada, and the hills are just not long or super steep. So for someone who was not a climber back then, and I got through it just fine, it's kind of fun. It reminds me of a little bit of like a roller coaster in that section. And so I kind of had these mental games that I played with myself to get through the climbs. And once I got on the course, it was, again, when I saw the wall that I mentioned while driving, it wasn't a wall at all. It was actually because I had so much more momentum on the downhill to be able to go uphill. I do think it's important if you're someone, again, like me, who back then I wasn't very comfortable descending on my bike. Definitely something you want to practice if possible. Practice changing your gears because you're going to be going from a downhill. You want to make sure you're not in too steep of a gear that you can't easily get up that uphill. So you want to be mindful of shifting down to an easier gear because after one descent, you have an ascent. And so you don't want to get caught in a too big of a gear on that next climb. So it's really important to figure out and get some training and preparation for. Very beautiful course. It's definitely one of my destinations. And I live in North America, but it's still a destination race for me.
The first 18 miles, they talk about the out and back is pretty flat. There's like a little bit of a climb in there, but it's a good chance for you to get your nutrition in, get into a rhythm, get your heart rate down, and prepare yourself for the real challenge of the bike course. And that happens around mile 18 or 19. And from what my experience is that these climbs are really only about depends on your fitness and strength level, between 9 and 15 minutes long. Depends on how long, because they're like, somewhere, a mile and a half, 2 miles, maybe 3 miles of total climbing before you flatten out. So if you know that going in, you can mentally prepare for the challenge that I'm only going to be in this situation for, so many miles before the next downhill happens. And that's what the gradual rolling hills are. And it does add up. And that's why the elevation adds up over time. Before I did my last one, and the last one was, I believe, was 2015 was the full, but I've done the half as recently as 2022. It's just the same course twice. I was able to watch a Coeur d'Alene bike course video on YouTube that showed elevation, distance. They put a camera on someone's car or something like that, and they just drove it. So that's out there online. It's only a 4-minute video because they speed it up, but that's a good way to pre-ride the course without having to pre-ride the course.
Well, and speaking of, they also have apps out there if you're an indoor rider like myself, such as Ruby or Full Gas, that have the Ironman 70.3 and 140.6 courses on them. And in 2022, during my last Hawaii preparation, I rode the Kona course. Sometimes I rode the full course in one sitting. Sometimes I just rode it in pieces. And that was very helpful for me to remind myself of what kind of grades of hills I was getting myself into, especially Hawi. Hawi was not as bad as I remembered it being because I was able to visualize it by riding one of these courses online. And another thing I like about a 2-loop course is I like to use the first loop to kind of get in a rhythm, kind of feel out the course and ride it in more of an easier effort. So then I know what I'm getting into, that I'm able to manage the second part of the course. Because in any Ironman, the bike race starts at like mile 80. And you want to make sure when you get to mile 80, you still have gas in the tank to get you through the final 32 miles. And that's where it's going to be hilly again on that second bike loop.
Your 2023 Ironman Coeur d'Alene run course is as followed. It features a spectator-lined, energetic neighborhoods, amazing views of Lake Coeur d'Alene, and one of the most spectacular finish lines you can get running downhill into the finish line in downtown Coeur d'Alene. This pleasantly mild run course allows you to challenge your pace while spectators keep your energy up throughout the day. The course highlights the best that Coeur d'Alene has to offer: views of the lake, wonderful host community, and again, one of the best finish lines in the world. Of course, I'm biased, and so are you, because we've done this one before. And this year's course is 3 loops. So it's pretty straightforward, plenty of aid stations, and a chance to see your spectators as well as your fellow competitors multiple times throughout the day.
Well, I think it's great that it's a 3-loop course because that helps me break up the marathon. Instead of thinking of running 26.2 miles, I think of I'm running 3 loops. 3 is a much smaller number than 26. And so for me personally, that's very helpful for my mental status. And I recall that it seems fairly flat. Now, the website says it has, I think, 1,400 feet of elevation gain. And remember, that's over the course of 26 miles. That's not like something you're doing each loop. And so in my mind, that's a fairly flat, more flat than hilly type of course. So it's pretty fast. And so in your training, you want to make sure when you get to about that 8-week out point that you're doing your long runs on courses that simulate that type of, elevation gain, flatness, and that you have that, feel of what it feels like to run on that type of terrain. It is on concrete, so you want to make sure get your body used to that. But it's very pretty. It's very spectator friendly in a 3-loop course with plenty of volunteers and aid stations, and it's definitely one of my favorites.
This is a course that would not use the word boring at all. There's plenty of turns left and rights, incredible views when you're running, spectators along. The crowd support, whether it's the volunteers or family and support, is incredible. I can't say enough about how fun this is to run. And the aid stations are plentiful because you're doing these multiple times. You see aid stations on your left and your right. And it's really, This is such a good manageable run course to do because of the turns, because of the constant change in scenery. And you can look forward and break it up. Like you do 3 loops of the breakup. You can break it up by aid station. You can break it up, into 5Ks. Either way, it goes by kind of fast,
Yeah.
and it's fun, and it's something to look forward to.